Socorro, New Mexico is the kind of small town people are usually traveling through on their way to someplace else. Visitors rarely slow down long enough to learn that this place has a mysterious past, and that one retired Socorro police officer is still haunted by the unearthly encounter that took place here 32 years ago. Lonnie Zamora remembers April 24th, 1964. He was a rookie on the force, returning to the station after an uneventful day. Then, a speeding vehicle passed Zamora's patrol car, and he set off in pursuit.
When we got to this hill, I saw a lot of dust, and I let the speeder go, and I turned to investigate. I could see a white object sitting between those two bushes over there, and I had to come real slow because this was a messed up road, had big rocks on it and everything. I thought it was the kids from high school. They were racing up here, and maybe one of the teenagers had turned over.
When the speeding object came to a stop, Zamora claims that he saw two figures in white coveralls emerge from a strange white UFO. He moved in slowly.
I came up here on this road till I could find a flat spot where I could park my car. I got out the car and glanced down to the arroyo there, and I saw this white-looking object. It was sort of a big egg shape, bigger than a car. Those are the exact bushes that were there, and the craft was sitting right in between them two. So I started down to see what it was, and then I heard this big boom in the bottom, and the fire came off the bottom. So I started running behind my police car to take cover. I could feel the heat off that because it was windy like now. And then it gradually pulled up about 20, 30 feet and stayed there for a while and then just took off.
His radio was dead. Zamora could only watch in awe as the object disappeared over the horizon. As soon as it was gone, the police radio crackled to life, and Zamora called for backup. A New Mexico State Police unit quickly arrived.
We came down here, and we saw this big rock right down here, and it was still on fire. And then we saw the imprints of the legs of the craft, and it was 4 of them. And then we saw this footprints around here.
By nightfall, the FBI had arrived on scene and began gathering evidence.
They went down there and measured the footprints and everything. And we stayed out here till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, still wondering what it was. But they didn't say what it was or not. About 9 o'clock, they said we went down to the courthouse, and we talked about it until about midnight.
Instantly, Socorro was the center of an unprecedented media frenzy.
This is one of the few sightings that got national attention immediately. Lonnie Zamora's story is on the national news. It's in all the newspapers. Everybody's talking about it.
Kevin Randall is an internationally renowned UFO investigator. He feels the Socorro events stand alone because of the amount of physical evidence collected at the scene.
Landing gear marks were found. The bush was burned by the UFO engine. There were occupants, creatures from the craft sighted by Lonnie Zamora.
And the event brought the greatest UFO researcher of the day to Socorro.
J. Allen Hynek, the Air Force consultant, came to Socorro. He looked at it, talked to Zamora, talked to Zamora's superiors, talked to people who saw the landing traces, took photographs. So there's physical evidence remaining behind. It's one of the few times they said there could be a flying saucer.
I had conversations with Dr. Hynek about the Socorro case, and his comments to me led me to believe that he felt that this was one of those cases where the government was unwilling to permit him to say what he would like to say about it, and that dismayed him a great deal.
According to Timmerman, a longtime associate of J. Allen Hynek, the Socorro event was one of the defining moments in Hynek's career.
He felt that this was one of the most important cases he'd come across. And I think that maybe his attitude toward it was developed as a result of his feel about the Lonnie Zamora, the primary witness.
Lonnie Zamora is very credible. He's a police officer. He has nothing to gain by telling this story. He is stuck with this story from the very beginning. This is what he saw. There's no question that Lonnie Zamora saw something unusual on the ground.
According to the Air Force and government, they say they don't know what it was, and they never told me not to say or say about it, talk about it. But they say that they don't know what it was.
In In fact, it took 21 years for the Air Force to finally offer an explanation for the Socorro UFO landing. They offered logs from the White Sands Missile Base, charting government testing of the newly developed lunar landing module. But the logs indicate that tests ended more than 5 hours before Zamora's sighting.
The Air Force explanation simply doesn't work because they have no documentation to place the lunar lander in that portion of New Mexico at that time. It does not match Zamora's description.
I think if Dr. Hynek were here today and saw this new documentation available, the report that the Air Force says it was a lunar lander, if anything, that landed near Socorro, I think he'd say bourgeois. He'd say that this is the government trying to do its fancy little dance and saying things that will satisfy the media, that will satisfy the country and the world, that there's no reality to the UFO phenomenon, whereas there is.
And according to JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the lunar lander alluded to in the government data did not fly. It was dropped from a tower and had no system of independent propulsion as reported by Zamora. Randall believes that this is proof the Socorro UFO was not a lunar lander.
The Air Force completed their UFO investigation, said they had nothing more to say on it, and yet now they're coming out this year providing us with new explanations for old sightings. I have no idea why they're doing it, but I find it highly significant.
Randall believes it is Socorro's proximity to several highly sensitive military bases that have prompted a continuing disinformation campaign.
It is between the Los Alamos National Laboratory, the White Sands Missile Range. The Very Large Array radio telescope is 50 or 60 miles to the west. Socorro's right in the middle of this. If you've got a race of intelligent beings wanting to see what we're doing, this makes a perfect place for them to come to observe our steps into space and what our science is doing.
According to Timmerman, the Socorro event convinced Dr. Hynek that the truth about UFOs was being manipulated by the Air Force. After Socorro, Hynek left his post. The government lost one of its most prestigious spokespersons and gained its most ardent critic.
Dr. Hynek saw this, and it was very obvious to him that what Lonnie Zamora was saying in the depths of his honesty was not what the military was saying in their attempt to explain it.
It happened in Socorro, New Mexico, here just outside of this quiet desert town. A state highway patrol officer, Lonnie Zamora, was on duty, as he had been for the past several years. A black Chevrolet was observed, speeding by the courthouse. Zamora put his highway patrol car into pursuit. Lonnie chased the car north on US 85. As he passed this hilly area, Zamora heard a roar and something caught his attention. 10 or 15 seconds pass. Lonnie then calls in to the sheriff's office.
The time was about 5:45, I recall, when he said Socorro 2-1044, an accident. And then he said, I'll be 10-6 out of the car, which meant that I was going to be investigating a possible accident.
And I went up this road about a half a mile, and then I stopped my car and I got out and looked out, and I could see a white looking object in the distance. I thought it was an overturned car at first, but I got into my patrol car and went up closer to it. And when I started to get out of the car, I heard a big roar. As I got to it, I could see looked like a couple of coveralls hanging from a clothesline. I couldn't see what it was, but it looked like a couple of coveralls.
Zamora called in. He sounded very excited. He said he watched an object lift up slowly and disappeared into the sky very fast. I went down to where the object had been, and I noticed the brush was burning in several places. The object had left 4 perpendicular impressions on the ground. I noticed several bushes were smoldering, but they felt cold to the touch. I noticed what appeared to be a couple of oval footprints on the ground. I knew Lonnie had seen something. The proof was right there.
incident was very interesting, to say the least. It seems to differ from practically all the earlier cases we investigated from one standpoint. The vehicle had left pod marks. There was an insignia observed by Lonnie Zamora on the side of the craft. The insignia was unidentifiable, not American nor Russian. And last of all, the observation of these two people in some sort of suit.
We went over the case completely. We had soil samples tested at the Air Materials Laboratory. The burnt bushes were analyzed for propellant residue. We measured the distances between the pod marks. My first reaction was that it was a lunar test module from NASA or the Air Force. That seemed to be the only logical explanation. This was probably the best documented case in the Air Force files, and I checked it out everywhere, all the way up to the top, even to the White House command post, and nothing.
According to the official status of the sighting of Lonnie Zamora, case carried as unidentified, pending additional data.
This is Walter Strode, your roving reporter at KSRC Radio in Socorro, New Mexico. We have with us this afternoon Mr. Lonnie Zamora, the Socorro patrolman that while chasing a car, found himself in an area about 2 miles west of Socorro and 1 mile east of KSRC radio station, at which time he reports he came upon an unidentified object resting on 4 legs. That as he drew closer, the object took off with a loud roar spouting blue-red flame and disappeared in the sky. A great number of cars and Socorro people have gathered here in front of the studios of KSRC to catch a glimpse of Mr. Zamora as he arrived and welcome him with their car horns. Mr. Zamora, after coming upon this object, just what did happen?
I went up that little road for about half a mile, I guess. Came up to this little barking deal there on the side of the road, and I sort of glanced out the window, looked to my left, and seen this white object on the ground. So I thought it might be a car that had turned over. So I was in a real big hurry going out there to investigate. Thought maybe somebody would be hurt. That time I saw this white egg-shaped looking object.
It looked something like an egg, you mean?
Yeah, from the distance I was, it looked like an egg to me.
About the size of a car, I think someone said.
Yes, sir, it looked like a car had turned over. That's why I say it's the size of a car.
And did it have any kind of markings on it of any kind that you noticed?
Yes, it did. Not from that far, I didn't see the markings. When I went up closer to it, I did see the markings.
And someone said that the markings, as you saw it, was an upside-down V with 3 lines running through it.
No, sir, I couldn't tell you that because they still don't want me to say nothing about the markings.
No, they don't want you to say anything about the markings. All right, we won't question you on that. And if we run into an area that they don't want you to talk about, well, you just say so. And this happened about 5:30 Friday afternoon.
It happened about 5:50, about 10 minutes to 6.
About 10 minutes to 6. And you did place a call in to Sergeant Chavis of the State Police to come on out and help you with the investigation.
As soon as I saw this object, I didn't know what it was. I placed a call to Sergeant Chavis of the State Police. Told him if he would come out there and help me on this. He said, yes, I'll be right there in about a few minutes.
And he arrived just about 2 or 3 minutes after the object had taken off and left.
Well, the object was still about top of the mountains up there whenever he arrived.
It was still, that's the direction it went. It went over the top of the mountain. And we've heard several reports that it flew low, like it was dragging something, and we've heard some...
It was very low to the ground. At the time I was seeing it, it was very low to the ground, up to the perlite mill there, and then it started gaining altitude.
Now, also, it was reported to me that when you first drove up into this area and sighted this object, that the motors were running and it was going bzzz, 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 or some such sound as that. Is that correct?
I couldn't say because it happened so fast. I started running. I was
scared. Well, I don't blame you. The thoughts of it even scares me yet. Now, you did say that you saw two what appeared to be people dressed in white uniforms with, did they have helmets on like spacemen or anything?
No, sir, I wouldn't say they're people. I saw something white coverall, that's what I could say.
They looked like there was something in white coverall.
Right.
But you couldn't identify them as actually being a human being as you and I are.
No, sir, I couldn't.
You didn't know whether they turned and saw you or what then?
Well, I would say that this white object turned and saw me. Yes.
Were there two of them?
I would say there were two because one was in front and the other object was in back.
Did you have a chance to notice what kind of a doorway they had to this object, this flying object?
Didn't notice any doors, no.
And when it took off, it made a loud roaring sound. Is that?
Yes, sir. Very loud noise, roar sound.
And then after it got up in the air about 20 feet, well, the sound seemed to disappear.
The sound was disappeared and was very, very quiet. You could hear a pin drop there.
And now these markings it left on the ground. Now the reports that I have had, and I haven't had a chance to go and take a look, and the winds yesterday probably spoiled a lot of that anyway, was that they were deep indentations in the ground, approximately 10 inches wide and 6 to 8 inches deep, about 15 feet apart. Is that a correct report?
Well, I would say it was about 19 feet apart of the prints.
Uh-huh. And were there any other prints, like footprints around the area right after the takeoff, or when you were making the investigation?
There were some prints, but I wouldn't know if there were footprints or anything, just prints, I would say.
You couldn't identify them as actually being a footprint, just indentations like maybe somebody might have walked there or something might have walked there.
Somebody walked around there because when I got there was nobody around there yet.
Now, there was, according to a report on one of the news, the television stations in Albuquerque, claimed that they had a call just about 5:30 in Albuquerque of a sighting of a flying object flying in this direction. Did you hear anything about that?
No, sir, I didn't.
Which, if that be true, means that someone in Albuquerque saw this object flying in this direction just prior to your sighting it. And which corroborates the fact that there was something here. Now, it's the feeling, I get the feeling, at least, Lonnie, of the people that I've talked to, and they were out in the area, that they are quite sure that something landed there and something took off from this spot because of not only the imprints that it left in the ground, but the fires that it started and the method of which the fire or the power that it was, whatever it was using, kind of spread itself as it took off. Is that right?
Right. I know there was something out there because I've seen it.
And what was your immediate reaction as soon as you realized that this thing might be an object from outer space?
Well, I didn't think it would be an object from outer space because I don't believe in things like this from outer space.
Well, it was something that you'd never seen before, and right. Enough to scare you to run in the other direction.
Well, what scared me was the loud noise and the flame that it had under it.
It had a large flame then, right, as it took off. Mm-hmm. Was it a yellow flame or?
It was a bluish orange flame. I thought this object was going to blow out. That's why I started running back.
And did you notice whether these arms that it was sitting on retracted back into the object as it flew away or not? You didn't have time. And tried just running in the other direction right at that time. I would have done too. Are there any other things about this sighting that you think our listening audience might be interested in, or something that you'll be allowed to tell us?
No, that's all I saw.
Uh-huh. And did it disappear into the high sky after it got over around the perlite, or just
yes, sir, it flew low to the perlite mine, then from there on, it just so fast that you could barely use
right straight up in the air.
You have to be paying attention to what you were looking at to see what he was doing.
Uh-huh. Well, do you think we're going to get any more of them around here?
Hope not. Not immediately.
Well, it was quite an interesting experience, I'm sure, and it's caused an awful lot of comment. Did the investigators that were called in make any comments at all in one direction or the other, with the exception of that they do not have any such object in this area?
Oh, they're still puzzled themselves, yes.
And there's been no report on the samplings they took of the area around there from the burning brush and the area that the blast hit the ground. That might give them a clue as to what kind of power was being used on this.
No, sir, no.
Uh-huh. Well, I think I've just about covered it here. Let's see. It wasn't dragging anything. We had a report that it was dragging something as it led.
No, I wouldn't say it was dragging nothing, just low to the ground.
And you can't think of anything else then about the sighting of this flying object that our listening audience might be interested in?
No, that's all I'll say now.
Well, Lonnie, I'm sure you've been getting an awful lot of questions and a lot of inquiry. I imagine you're beginning to get a little tired of it, actually, for so many people calling and asking you about it. Maybe this will be one way to keep too many people from having you have to go through the story over and over again. Right. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Mr. Lonnie Zamora. This is the gentleman, the Socorro patrolman, that Friday at around 10 minutes to 6 come up on an object, a flying object, an unidentified flying object, as the government prefers to call them.
Excuse me, Walter, I got some military people at the service office who want to talk to me now. I believe they're from UFO.
Well, you have some military people that are here from UFO to talk to you right now and to ask you some more questions about this. And they have not in any way tried to indicate that they didn't want us to cover this type of a newscast.
No, sir, I just told them I was going to come here and talk to you on the radio station. He said, all right.
Well, that's fine, and we would be interested in knowing what they think about it if they will allow it, and after you get through talking to them, if you would call us back here at KSRC and to give us some of the information that they might allow you to let us broadcast.
We'd be glad to.
All right. And Mrs. Zamora, I hope that you don't come upon any more of these objects unless we find out exactly what they are. So it's been a pleasure, Mr. Zamora, having you in our studios, and we want to thank you, and I know our listeners thank you, and this is expressed by the great number of cars that are out here in front of our studios just to get a glimpse of what we might call a Socorro celebrity right at the moment.
Thank you again, Mrs. Zamora. It's been very nice having you in our KSRC studio. You've just been listening to a KSRC radio special featuring an interview with Mr. Lonnie Zamora, the patrolman here in Socorro, that sighted a unidentified object that flew